Thank you for being a member. Davey, Maya, Erwin, Froghead Dog, Streets, Zephyr, Static Gray, Strong, Tall, Handsome, Muscular, Raw, Dominant Man, Kikiri, Rimu, Fernando, Chichikun, Asp, Thermetro, Livid, Joycon, CJ, Gabriel, Lazaro, Jeffrey, Ghibli, Mike, Solar, Glizzy, Eric, Louisa, Pukang Gang, Tanner. Thank you for being a member. Hello, Papuki here, and welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. First off, I am going to go over Gifted Conviction shortly, because it is very important to the knowledge given in this video. Gifted Conviction is a very popular hunter exotic. I made a video on it a year ago, and I made a video on it recently when the Ascension changes happened. What this exotic does is not give you a 50% DR. YouTubers, even myself, I will admit it, have kept saying that Gifted Conviction gives you 50% DR for doing nothing but ascending near enemies. This is a lie. I lied to you. I did that. I own up to it. But I have a little bit of reparations here with a new build. So, Gifted Conviction's DR stacks up from 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. 4 times is 50% DR. When you are jolting enemies, there is a cooldown between when enemies are jolted to when you get restoration stacks or resist stacks given to you. And that means if you're just using Ascension like most people do, you will not get the 50% damage reduction. You are usually getting, almost every single time, only resist times 2. That is a 25% DR for 10 seconds, which means all that gaming you've done with Gifted Conviction and you're like, oh my god, I'm so tanky, you're actually just getting a 25% DR, and that's it. So, while I was shopping around and making builds, I discovered something I've kept in my closet for a long time. PvE Stompies. Yes, this is a Stompies build in PvE, but you're gonna have to listen, alright? You're gonna have to listen. Stompies got a buff a while ago that made it to where anytime you are in the air, you are given 30% stacking DR. The best way to view this is to have an air trigger weapon, and notice every single time air trigger is procced. So when air trigger is procced, Stompies is actively giving you a stacking 30% DR. Which means if you use Ascension, you get 15% from Ascension, or Amplification, stacked on top of the 30%, making it around the same as Woven Mail in terms of damage resist. And all you need to do is be in the air. That's it. That's all you gotta do. You can bunny hop, you can do whatever. Your normal jump height gets increased when you are amplified. So if I'm jumping right now, I'm this high, I, use this, and now I'm jumping even higher, which means Ascension and Stompies are actually a synergistic combo in PvE. How crazy is that? So everyone's been using Gifted Conviction so they can use their Ascension 15 meters within an enemy and then get 25% DR for 10 seconds, and they're going, this is the best thing since canned bread. When Stompies gives 5% more DR and it's active practically at all times. So we are going to be using a very similar setup to Gifted Conviction. We are going to be running whatever super you want, except for Storm's Edge. We want Gambler's Dodge. You can use whatever jump you want, but I prefer triple jump. Threaded Spikes, we can sever enemies so we take even less damage from majors, and it's probably the best melee on Hunter, let's be honest. Grapple because it's the only grenade on Hunter. Stylish Executioner because invisibility is very clutch in solo situations and just keeping yourself alive in general. Ascension. This is the best thing hunters have currently. You press an aerial button, you go in the air, it gives you amplification for 15 seconds. It stuns overload champs because it jolts every enemy in that area. Fantastic. And because of Facet of Hope, which gives you 60%, I believe it's 60%, class ability regeneration when you have an elemental buff, the 15 seconds of amplification cause that Facet of Hope to proc. And it stacks with Radiant, which you can get by throwing your spike and then ascending, and then you have both things of Facet of Hope going at the same time. Meaning, you have amplification every single second you play Destiny 2 with this build. You just have the 15% DR, which stacks with Stompy's 30 for around Woven Mail. We're going to be using Facet of Protection, so we have even more DR passively We are using Facet of Dawn, so we get Radiant, which helps Hope proc and increases our damage when we are going against champions and such. So we can get our Ascension back faster. We have Purpose, so when we pick up an orb, we get one of these types of sustains, and this does stack, of course, with the DR. So you can have Woven Mail on top of Stompies, on top of Amplification. So if you're using Cytarachne, you just get Woven Mail, but if you're using Stompies, you can get Woven Mail and Stompies. So you can get around a 70 to 80% DR, which is way higher than the very often lied about 50% from Gifted Conviction. Then we have Facet of Balance. This one is a bit of a new fragment to be seeing on the channel here. I love this fragment. It is basically Free Devour, or the Indomitability Origin trait, if you know that one. Basically, killing 3 enemies with a light energy thing or a dark energy thing gives you 10% of that, type of whatever, right? So if you throw your Threaded Spike out, you catch it, and only a little bit of it's left, right? But you have Radiant. You get 3 kills with your light primary or whatever you're using, Velocity Baton, and it'll proc Faceted Balance and give 10% of your melee back, which is, Faceted Balance is basically just Pugilist and Demolitionist rolled into a single perk. You're going to notice it activate often, and you're going to have a ton of extra grenade and melees just because of this singular fragment. Now, going over the mod setup, this mod setup is very simple. It is the same setup I always use because there's literally nothing better than it. But for our gauntlets, we are going to be using Heavy-Handed because Threaded Spike often will kill an enemy and give us an orb for sustain. We're using 2 Focusing Strikes because, Focusing Strike procs on our grapple, so there's no point in using 2 different ones. So when we use Focusing Strike, we're going to get 17% of our class ability back. So if you use Ascension to get up in the air, and then you throw your Threaded Spike out immediately, you're going to get your Ascension back really, really quickly. So that is all for the setup of the build and the talk. Now I'm going to be showing some gameplay of this wonderful DR stacking build.